Hello everyone, we're broadcasting live from the Web 2.0 Expo in San Francisco. We've got three guests today. First one is Brady Forrest, co-chair of the Expo. Thanks for being with us again.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Excellent.
It's always fun to cap off the day this way.
Great. So first question for you, which of the day's keynotes and sessions left an impression on you?
Well, I mean, he's in the room, so I have to say go Wang's. Definitely. And it did. He, Ge is the CEO and founder of Smule. Probably everyone on this stream has one of his apps, either the Sonic Later, Ocarina, or, I mean, my favorite being Magic Piano because it makes me sound good. Although I've never been able to actually get the I Am T-Pain app to work. I really love his stuff, and he gave a great performance that left everybody cheering and clapping. It was a great end of the day. But I also really enjoyed seeing what Lily Cheng launched from Bing with Spindex, which is a personal search index. It takes your tweets, your Facebook, your Evernote, which was my own personal request for the app, and Docs, and lets you search on it. They realized that a search index for a person is actually small enough that they can scale that out and are going to continue down that path, I hope.
Excellent. So a couple of big topics came up over the course of the day, and that actually dovetail a bit with what we talked about yesterday, the themes that you were really shooting for. One of them is HTML5, and I am using this as a bit of a segue because we have Eric Meyer here as well.
Absolutely. He's in the room.
He sure is. We have to plug everybody who's in the room. So a question I have for you, there's a lot being made about HTML5 versus Flash, and is there actually a battle going on here? What's your take on this whole thing?
Well, we anticipated that it would be a hot topic, and there's multiple sessions across the week on HTML5 and Flash, and Eric gave one, HTML5 versus Flash today, and then tomorrow I'm interviewing Kevin Lynch, where it'll certainly be a topic for, I'm guessing, a third of the time. But I don't know that it's so much a battle as a shift. As Eric pointed out quite eloquently today, and Dion showed yesterday in his workshop, HTML5, which is a combination of HTML, CSS, and the new JavaScript APIs that are in modern browsers, as they say, have really caught up in a lot of ways to where Flash is. And as you'll see later in the week, startups are going to start to make decisions moving away from Flash to HTML5 because they want to be accessible on the dominant mobile platform. Now, whether that means the end of Flash or not, I don't know. I think they will coexist for quite some time, and I think we'll see Adobe eventually morph their strategy to take advantage of HTML5 as opposed to set themselves up in competition with where the web is going.
Right. So do you feel like we're right at the beginning of what's going to play out here?
I feel like we are at, yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, the major browsers are now all supporting the big components of HTML5. IE9 is looking very promising, and I think we're going to see more websites start to take advantage of that. YouTube has an HTML5 beta right now where you can take advantage of that and try out the new controls. And I think a number of sites, they want to be accessible from what is becoming one of the dominant mobile web browsing platforms, the iPhone and iPad.
So another topic that's big here, and it's always big, is social media. But I feel like the discussion is changing a little bit. It feels almost like social media is reaching another stage, perhaps maturing into something else. Is that your sense as well?
Well, I mean, you can always tell when these types of platforms are maturing when they stop talking about themselves. So like when bloggers stop talking about blogging all the time, that's when you could tell that it was moving to a new direction. It was just becoming part of the ecosystem and part of something people were always going to use. When tweets stopped talking about Twitter, you could tell it was going to become actually useful and would be used by different companies and people. And so I think we are seeing that with social media. And I think, I mean, Facebook's moves in the past 2 weeks with the social plugins have made major headway in terms of enabling the rest of the web to use Facebook's social graph. And that is going to forever change the way social media is used because companies will be able to tap into what Facebook users are looking at, and we'll be able to communicate with them better.
Sure. Okay. Last question I have for you, sort of in the big themes. The founders of Dropbox and Zobni had a great session this morning talking about how they went from 0 to 1 million users, basically without spending anything on PR or marketing. And one of the things that occurred to me as I was sitting in on that was that the landscape for startups like that right now, given things like S3, for example, really just allows for that type of innovation to take place. Is this the best time to be a startup, that you can tap into a lot of these third-party services, the platforms that we were talking about yesterday?
Well, and I think it's only getting better, actually. I mean, Dropbox is making major headway. I had someone tell me, Raven Zachary, who was our iPad speaker earlier today, told me he's going to ditch his laptop and just roll with an iPad. He's going to have 2 Macs at his workplace and home and use an iPad and Dropbox to sync in between. No more lugging around the 16-pound laptop. But I think, you know, any startup that wants to get rolling these days, they can actually move even higher up the stack than S3. There's a startup that was here earlier today, Simple Geo, that is focusing on cloud services just for mobile developers. So if you want to roll out the next Foursquare type app, but you don't want to invest in a geo developer, a web ops guy, instead you want to just focus on the phone or the mobile client, you can use Simple Geo and you just pay per use. You throw up all your location data there. You can grab location data from them and then query it as needed.
Wow.
And you could, I mean, basically Chipotle
Sure.
could add Foursquare functionality to their mobile app without really hiring anybody other than their mobile developer.
Wow, yeah. All right, so that
It
really
is just
plugs into
amazing.
the platform stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So as a preview for tomorrow, anything that's catching your eye, things that you're looking forward to?
Well, you know, one of the things that I'm most excited about is the Parrot drone that's going to be demoed tomorrow morning. And what that is it's an iPhone-controlled helicopter. And it's a small, like 2-foot by 2-foot device, and it uses a local Wi-Fi network to control it. And using the accelerometer in the iPhone, you control the direction that it flies, and you can see on the iPhone screen the actual video shot from the helicopter. That's just opening the keynotes. Then in my own interview with Kevin Lynch, I think will be quite interesting. And then after that, we have a great panel for the future of browsers, led by Dion Almer of Ajaxian and now Palm, which is going to have representatives from Firefox, Brendan Eich, the CTO, Alex Russell from Chrome, Douglas Crockford from Yahoo, a representative from IE and from Opera. So all the major players will be represented and really talk about where that's going, and HTML5 will be a hot topic there as well.
Excellent, great, all right. Well, thank you very much for
Absolutely.
coming by.
Thanks for having me again.
All right.
Cheers.
And we'll see you tomorrow. So next up, we have another guest. We've got Eric Meyer of Complex Spiral Consulting, and as Brady was mentioning before, he gave a great session today on HTML5 versus Flash. I think I've got that right. So Eric, come on in.
Hey.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So,
Before we start, I have a
Yes,
question.
yeah,
The
absolutely.
helicopter, is that going to be flying around during your interview? with I will pay you cash money to attach a banner to it that has a little blue Lego. No, I'm kidding.
so watch for that tomorrow. Right? All right. So HTML5 versus Flash. It's the big battle that's
Yes.
going on, right?
Well, the big argument anyway.
Yeah. Right. So the big question there is, will HTML5 actually be the end of Flash? I mean, is that even a question worth asking?
It depends on your time scale. Because in the next 3 to 5 years, no.
Right.
In 15 to 20 years, maybe. It sort of depends, on how the web stack evolves. And I try to use the term web stack as opposed to HTML5 because we're sort of starting to use HTML5 as a term to mean all the web technologies, right? And that's kind of, HTML5 is a markup language. It's not scripting and presentation and all that good stuff. So, if Adobe kind of decides that they're done with Flash and they don't want to do anything with it, right? And or they take it in a direction that turns out to have been a strategic mistake, then yeah, okay. We've seen companies do that before. But then again, maybe they won't, and the two will always be together,
Right.
as it were, because, Flash allows capabilities at this point that the web stack can't match and probably won't for a while. But the two are, much closer together. Yeah, but I think the whole, will it kill Flash? It's in a way, it's almost like asking, will HTML kill images? Right. I mean, they
Sure.
do go together
Right.
in certain ways. But, everyone loves a good argument.
Sure.
And we're kind of done beating up on Internet Explorer. Like, that's just been done for so long that
Right.
we're all tired of it. And
Right.
I guess there needs to be something new to argue about,
Sure.
sadly. So.
Do you feel like the argument is actually obscuring some deeper points that are going on? I mean, one of the things I'm really interested in is I think a lot of development is going to be coming from the mobile side. A lot of innovation is going to be coming from the mobile side. And a lot of the discussions that are happening seem to suggest that HTML5 is going to mesh nicely with mobile.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about things like HTML5 and the web stack is they actually have caused changes in the mobile space already, and vice versa, right? I mean, the people working on HTML5 and the web stack have looked at mobile and tried to think of ways to come in. I mean, yeah, any argument like this, who's better, who's going to kill who, always obscures deeper and more interesting points, which is one of the reasons why I, for one, am getting really tired of the whole argument, because, it's, can't we all just get along, right? I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche, but at the same time, why talk about killing one or, one killing the other or one eliminating the need for the other?
Right.
Anyway.
Right. Where do you think the anti-Flash sentiment comes from? Is it because it's not natively part of a browser?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's some of it. There are people, and I have to admit, I have a little bit of a bias because I started out really early with the web, so I kind of grew up with it, right? So I kind of have this affinity for old school markup and not Flash, right? I remember the web before Flash or Future Splash, right? I mean,
Right.
I remember when that came out, and there were tons of plugins, right? And Cosmo Worlds was a plugin that was kind of interesting. You could fly around the solar system and build your own little 3D things, and nobody uses that anymore, right?
Right.
And there were all these plugins, and the problem then was, instead of nobody upgrades their browser, it was nobody downloads plugins.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, I do sort of come from that space. But so to me, plugins always felt a little kludgy, right? It's like we took this thing and we rammed it into the web.
Right.
But I was young and brash, and what can you say? Since then I've sort of come to the point of, the web can't do everything. It can't. It at least historically hasn't been able to do 3D, for example.
Right.
In any real sense.
Right.
Once the Cosmo Worlds plugin died, except through Flash. Right. So. That's changing now. There's the O3D spec that's being worked on for hardware accelerated 3D, and Google's shown some really interesting demos of that. And there's also the guys at Google who took Quake 2 and ported it to run in a browser using no Flash, which is crazy insane, but also like really cool, and just gives an idea. It's like, okay, we've come this far, right? We can do these kinds of things, and maybe we can go even further. Right, even now, and we will be able to go further in the future. So, I mean, there's some of that. There are, some people just feel like if it's not part of the web stack technologies, then it's not worth talking about.
Right.
But, I think that's where, at least some of it comes from. Now, that's sort of in my crowd, the people that I know. I'm not in that sense, I'm not speaking of companies, for example.
Sure.
Right. So.
Right. Yeah, it's a different conversation, right?
Yeah, very much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, last question I have for you: what's your take on Apple trying to put the brakes on cross-platform development?
Well, I think that I mean I understand where they're coming from in some ways, right? They're very much. I mean, if you look at the iTunes store, it's very much about a controlled experience. It's a gated community, right? They exercise, at least in theory, quality control. They vet applications to make sure that they're not going to do nasty things to your phone. And there's some appeal to that, right? If you go to a store, like if you go to Walmart or the local hardware store or whatever, there's an unconscious assumption that the shelves have been stocked by someone who vetted the stock, right? They vetted the content of the shelves.
Right.
And when you go to a store and you don't feel that way, you notice it, right? And so there's some appeal there, not to people maybe like you or me.
Right.
Like if my desktop computer were like that, I would not use that system, right? But at this, so I sort of get where they're coming from in that sense, right? They want things to be sort of the most Mac-like they can be.
Sure.
But at the same time, they also, because they've had to, I guess, support the web. And so there's already a cross-platform way to do things on the iPhone, and it's the web stack. And there's been a lot of talk about how the web technologies can't possibly compete with native code. But that's really not as true as people think. There was I've forgotten the name now, but there's a JavaScript framework that just came out very recently that reproduces the interaction of sort of the native interaction of the iPhone and the iPad. So like the flick and the sort of the weighted scrolling or whatever the term is, which has always been web apps don't do that. They don't feel right. Whereas when you're playing around with a native app, it just feels right. Well, now there's a JavaScript framework to make it feel right. You see, and so then really, I think really the web will interpret the App Store as damage and route around it. In effect. And so there really is, there is a cross-platform solution that works on the iPad and the iPhone, and they can have terms in their licensure that says that you can't use these technologies to create apps that go in the App Store. But apps don't have to go through the App Store anymore. It's, like I say, I understand the appeal of the App Store for lots of people, but that doesn't have to be the case. It's possible now for someone to create a little, basically what looks like an iPhone app, and you go to a website and you click on a link and it puts a little icon on your, on your iPhone, and it's completely local and you don't have to have web access to use it. Like little games. People have already done this, and I think that's only going to grow. So, you know, and again, there's room in this world for stores where somebody has selected the stock and put it on the shelves, and there's room in this world for flea markets where it's, you discover things and there's no real, there's no central authority that says you can sell this here and you can't sell this here. And, you can find amazing things in flea markets. Sometimes the most amazing things are there and not in the store where somebody, had to go through and, pick a manifest. So.
Excellent. Interesting. All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the expo.
Thanks.
So our final guest today, and he is fresh off his keynote/performance, Wang of Stanford University in Smule. Come on. Great. Thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it. So I got a bunch of questions for you, and they're kind of all over the place. So I apologize in advance for not having sort of a theme that's running through this. But first one I have for you is, where did the idea come from to, when you're looking at the iPhone, and you're saying, yes, I see that there's musical application to this. Was there an aha moment for you?
I think this probably goes back to when we first started working with the Mobile Phone Orchestra, and this is actually in the fall of 2007. That's before the iPhone SDK was even announced. And we're actually working with Nokia phones to begin with. And in working with those phones, I realized, wow, what is on this phone? It's got like this powerful CPU. It's fast as CPUs were like on my desktop like 10 years ago. What's that doing here? It's got accelerometers, it has 2 cameras, it has a stereo speakers. It was actually the Nokia N95 we're experimenting with. And it's so programmable. We're programming it in a way that was very akin to actually programming computers. And the thing is, like, wow, I got to take this wherever I go, and like everything is right here. And these like small differences of just having something be a little bigger or just a little smaller actually makes a huge difference to people. And in working with the Mobile Phone Orchestra kind of at that very early stage is when we were like, whoa, there could be something, if only this were in the hands of tens, hundreds of millions of people, I think we might have some kind of potentially new revolution, a new era, and actually how people think about music is made, is actually consumed, and is actually shared.
I want to talk to you a little bit about that too, the sharing component of the applications that you've done. Was that always baked in? Was that something that you considered from the very beginning? Was it sort of a driver for a lot of these?
We To be honest, at the beginning, we really didn't know. Like, I think, like Eric Ries said during his keynote, startups are started under huge uncertainty. And in fact, that's something we kind of embraced, was that we really didn't know what we're doing. So I think the sharing component came serendipitously, but one thing we did have as part of the very early kind of just vision was that it's really about connecting people somehow in a way that you don't need to know who anyone is. That part was kind of a guess we kind of had at the beginning. And that sometimes just being able to like make music with someone you don't know. Like, for example, there's this notion of kind of a familiar stranger. These are the people you see every day when you get on the same train to work.
Right.
But you never feel compelled to go and talk to them, and you probably never will. And the thought was, hey, what if you got those people to start making music together?
Yeah.
In that they still don't need to talk to me. What would they even talk about? Like, if you go up to the person you've seen for the last 2 years, waiting for the same train, do you say, hey, my name is so-and-so,
Sure,
it's nice
right.
weather, how do you like this commute, et cetera. There's really no, there's still no reason to go do that. But if you can get them to maybe discover, hey, we're in the same place, using the same potential music, we're gonna have the same musical experience, that's much more of a natural way to actually get people connected, if people can just play some music together. So at least that was kind of the original ruminations that we had. But the kind of sharing aspect didn't really take form until actually Sonic Lighter. That's the very first app, and it was really serendipity that kind of led to that. I think we wanted to make a lighter that was Sonic, and then we had this extra like set of cycles we could use to do something else while we're designing this. And I think we just said, hey, why don't we make a globe where you can actually see other people lighting up on the globe, and can that be interesting? Let's experiment. And that turned out the globe has now been in every single Smule product ever since.
No kidding.
And so I think uncertainty and serendipity has been part of the equation, for better or for worse.
Right. Now, something you were talking about with the familiar stranger just sort of struck me there. The title of your keynote, I believe, was Breaking Barriers with Sound, right? So can you expand on that a little bit? Do you feel like sound music in particular has a way of breaking through communication in a way?
Totally. I think music is something that just seems powerful without needing to explain. Right. It's the opposite of logic without being illogical. Right. It's kind of something that's parallel to that. And we need logic, but also as humans, we seem to also need this other, intangible thing. Right. That's why we have a sense of aesthetic, why we find things beautiful. And for everyone, music, some type of music or sound is going to be powerful and emotional. And I think it's just really hard to find someone who hates music. Right.
Is there such a person?
I have never met that person. And there's always some sound, some music that engages each of us, and that's probably different for everyone. But I think it's there. And so, as a kind of a force that doesn't need reason, but is nonetheless powerful, and in some sense almost is soothing. We think about technology, and it's kind of scary. You see technology and the rate that technology is actually advancing, it's developing, it's evolving, and you wonder if we actually have the wisdom to actually use the technology we have wisely. Right. I don't know if that's always the case. Sure. And you can't really reason at all times with ourselves. It's kind of humanity. But then music seems to be this other thing that kind of appeals to us, to that, hopefully, a better side of us that counterbalances some of the more reckless parts of our nature. Right. If I may be allowed to philosophical,
sure, of course,
kind of a rant.
I went down that road, so yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, when you're saying that, I was watching some of the video demos of Ocarina, and when you start playing it, my reaction to that is almost sort of happy and joyful. And I've seen my fair share of applications and demos and that kind of thing, and that's usually not the reaction that I have. I might say, "Oh, that's cool," but with yours, it's that's amazing. It's sort of a fundamental thing that kind of kicks in. Now, if I can ask a sort of a geeky question.
Sure.
Now, did you sort of co-opt some of the functionality in the iPhone, like the accelerometer? Does that control vibrato, for example?
Yeah, we try to co-opt as much as we could, actually. it's a reason why we only have really the Ocarina on the iPhone right now. Is just has really the right combination of things for that experience.
Right.
Multi-touch screen co-opted for actually multi-touch finger holes that you can put down. Accelerometer controls vibrato. The breath sensor is located where is actually a really good place for breath sensor, the microphone. And so all of those, and also it's got a powerful CPU. So we're actually synthesizing the sound of Ocarina right inside the app. It's not recorded.
Right.
So everything is synthesized on the fly. And finally, we want it to be not just a sonic experience, but also a visual one. This is why we wanted to respond to touch. And one of the ways to do that was actually to have it visually respond to touch. You press down on the finger hole, then the ring expands. You blow into the mic, and this gentle green wave washes over the screen. And the idea there is just, we want this thing to really feel like it comes alive when you actually hold it, kind of like, as you might a sandwich. And you start playing it, and it should feel like a phone, but also should feel like it's been transformed.
Right.
So so in that sense, it was kind of maybe like almost a Zen kind of philosophy, where it was like, everything has limitations, all technology limitations. Instead of fighting those, why don't we just kind of roll with it, and let's actually turn those limitations into some things we can actually use to build an experience. And I think part of the magic, I guess, is that it's actually not an Ocarina. It's actually something that's patently, intended for something else.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, I can't really say why, but it does seem like it's got a certain charm to it.
Sure, yeah, it's taking on a life of its own, right? So I see you've got an iPad with you there as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what you're working on now?
I'm working on, continuing to experiment, both at SMUL and at Stanford. I think as a kind of music technology geek, I can say that the computer music community has been waiting for a device like this.
Really?
A commodity device like this for a long time. It's large multi-touch display with a lot of computing power, and now it's right here, and it's also it's actually priced, I think, to be put in the hands of a lot of people, and that's really exciting. We're prototyping new types of instruments now that the iPad is here. I think there's a whole new design mindset that is now can kick in. It's almost like for the iPhone, it was actually helpful that we didn't knew nothing in the beginning. That means we just had that much less to unlearn.
Sure.
And for the iPad, it's like the mentality is let's wipe away what we know about designing for the iPhone and the laptop, and let's just start over. And so it really feels like a third thing to be designing for.
Sure.
And that's kind of the mindset we're approaching it. And with that comes the experiments are like, okay, what kind of new instruments, new interactions can we actually prototype and then maybe build into products? And with these products, what kind of experiments can we make that see how people actually engage and relate to this technology?
Right.
And I think the one thing I would say about the iPad is that it really feels like a piece of technology made to be personal. It's just it's not about an extra feature that this tablet has that that one doesn't. It's meant to be part of everyday life. And I think that's what Brady was saying is that how do you know when a technology becomes mature when people stop talking about it? Well, another way to think about it, along the same line, I think Mark Weiser, the person who coined ubiquitous computing, he was known for saying, the most profound technologies are the ones that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they're indistinguishable from it. And so I think devices like super smartphones and devices like the iPad really seem to have that potential. It's just you just use it, but you don't even realize you're using it. You just kind of naturally do it.
Right.
And that naturalness is something to I think to really as people, I think people really respond to, and something I think we hold dear.
Right. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, and I know that you just came off of a performance, so you might have performance fatigue, but is there any chance that you could share a little something with us? I don't know if our audio will pick up too much of it.
Let me see if I can.
You can say no to this. It's been a long day.
I'm always up for performing.
All right, excellent.
No guarantees about the outcome. Well, let's see. I played the Zelda theme song on stage. Now I'll play a little bit something else.
Excellent.
How's that?
Great. That's awesome.
I actually once played that very song. Oh, thanks. I actually once played that very melody for a security guard at Boston Airport when he was checking my luggage for explosives. It turned out I was wearing my Smule shirt. He's like, hey, you guys made the Ocarina. I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, well, yeah, it's really sad. I have that app and my iPhone is currently broken. He like dropped it or something. And then so as he was making sure I wasn't carrying dangerous material onto the plane, I pulled out my iPhone and I don't know, somehow yesterday seemed to be a good choice for airport security. And that was, that kind of was a cool moment because I was like, I do own like actual clay ocarinas, but I don't carry them with me. This is the one piece of technology I have, and now I can pull it out. And I always think thinking about making music shouldn't be as any more burdensome than just picking up your phone and calling a friend. And in this case, you're just picking up your phone and you're blowing into it and you're making music. So
that's fantastic. Well, that's all we got for today. So thank you so much for coming by, and
it's a pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for the demo as well.
My pleasure.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that's all we've got for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 4:40 p.m. So please join us then, and check out web2expo.com for lots of videos. We've been filming all day, and we'll have lots more to come. Thanks for joining us.